Basketball and pop culture have always had huge overlap. Both sides seem to draw from each other, and while both have their own icons, only a few find their way to be a legend in both. Let's talk about Basketball Hall of Famer and maybe the most one-of-a-kind celebrity ever, Dennis Rodman. What's up everyone, my name's SRS Fico, and today we're going to be talking about yet another interesting fellow. Also, real quick before we start, I have been streaming every day on Twitch, so if you want to go give me a follow there, I'd really appreciate it. The link will be in the description. I've been streaming every day. I'll either be playing a random game or talking about some subject that interests me. Anyways, let's get right into it. Dennis Rodman was a revolutionary. He was way ahead of his time in terms of how he dressed, acted, and played. From walking around wearing a wedding dress to the most colorful outfit you'd probably ever see, to having a face full of piercings and multicolored dyed hair, Dennis didn't just demand the attention of everyone in the room, he brute forced it out of them with his actions and fashion choices. But he wasn't always this way. Believe it or not, when Rodman first started his career, he wasn't the outgoing, flashy, confident guy you see in his later escapades. There's no way to pin down why exactly he was the way he was back then, but I'd imagine it was growing up in a house full of sisters and having no father or real male figure to look up to. I think that might have something to do with it. His mom and sisters actually described him as extremely shy and secluded. This is a big reason he eventually fell into heavy drinking, but we'll talk about that in a bit. For now, let's just start with talking about Dennis Rodman on the basketball court. Dennis Rodman came into the NBA in 1986 as a second-round draft pick for the Detroit Pistons. Over the next several years, the Pistons emerged as one of the best teams in basketball, but also one of the least likable. They played rough, they played in your face, and they were not afraid to hurt you. Dennis Rodman was a huge part of that. In Detroit, Dennis emerged as a defensive mastermind, and this eventually was the biggest strength of him as an athlete. If you know much about Dennis Rodman, this next part may not surprise you, but Dennis was an absolute genius at anticipating rebounding.
Click and go back this way, boom, here, click and go that way, boom, that way, click here and go back this way. So basically I just started learning how to put myself in a position to get the ball.
It actually makes a lot of sense. Dennis became the best defender in basketball because he mastered anticipating his opponent's movements on ball and trajectory of ball movement while in the air. He was just so analytical on the floor and developed a skill that no one could match at the time. He's 23rd in rebounds of all time at just the peeny-weeny size of 6'7". Twice in Detroit, he averaged over 18 rebounds per game, which is just nuts. No one has done that since. For reference, no active player has even had 16 per game in a season. Save some for the rest of us. He was the oldest player to lead the league in rebounding one year. He set the record for most consecutive seasons led in rebounding with 7, and he holds the all-time record for rebounding percentage. If the NBA did superlatives like school yearbooks did, Dennis would probably win most likely to rebound a giant meteor falling from space. Finally! In Detroit, Dennis won 2 championships, but not long after, the era of the bad boy Pistons came to an end. When Dennis got traded away from the Pistons, he was devastated. He finally had what felt like structure, something to fall back onto when times got rough, a family. And now it was all falling apart before his eyes. During this time, the summer of 1993, Dennis wanted to remake himself. This is when he saw the movie Demolition Man and decided he would start with his hair. This is the reason the first color he chose was blonde, and the crowd loved it. It seemed the more flashy he got, the more people loved him. His friend and former teammate Jack Haley told a story of when he jokingly told Dennis he should dye his hair green.
The blonde hair, and jokingly, I say, why don't you dye it green?
Sure enough, Rodman showed up the next day ready for a St. Patty's Day party. Dennis loved the attention, and after seeing how much everyone else loved his new style, he decided he wanted to take it to the next level. Around this time is when he started getting piercings and tattoos. 2 nose piercings, both ears, and 1 lip, paired with the hair and body full of tats, he was definitely a spectacle to say the least. And, as a San Antonio Spur, that spectacle continued. In just 2 years as a Spur, his reputation in the NBA cemented to what you may have envisioned it to be. He became the guy no team really wanted to touch, which is why it was considered such a risk when the team he's most famous for playing for picked him up, the Chicago Bulls. Oh yeah, remember when we said that when Dennis was on the Pistons, they were a very rough team? Yeah, well the Bulls got the worst of it, and Dennis and his friends just basically bullied Michael Jordan for years. Look up the footage on YouTube when you're done here. They just clocked each other non-stop. As you might know, Dennis joining the Bulls completed the ultimate basketball dream team. To cap off a dominant trio, he joined Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, or to some people, the dude from Space Jam and some guy who judged the dunk contest this year. Dennis and the Bulls changed basketball. Without Dennis, you wouldn't have had Michael Jordan be as revered as he is. They won 3 titles in a row from 96 to 98, and were the most iconic team in the history of basketball. If you're counting, Dennis now has 5 rings, 1 for each finger on his hand or toe on his feet. Wouldn't be surprised if he put him on his feet, not gonna lie. But as per usual with Dennis, the dynasty soon came to an end. After a brief stint playing with Shaq and Kobe, RIP, in LA plus 12 games as a Maverick, Dennis's NBA career came to an end. At this point, his professional career was in ruins. So he went back home to California and turned into a full-time party animal. And oh my God, Dennis was an animal. You mean that in the nicest way. Now, what you've probably been waiting for. Dennis Rodman off the basketball court. The easiest place to start would probably be his appearance, because how the could you miss it? Dennis doesn't care what you think of him, and in that sense, honestly, good for him. And it's definitely the first sign that shows Dennis marches to the beat of his own drum. A Google image search of any picture of him from 94 on should illustrate that. The piercings, the hair, the fits, any of it. Take your pick. Then there's just his demeanor and all the stories about his personality. If you want to see true Dennis Rodman in a nutshell, his Eric Andre show appearance is just that.
What are you gonna do, brother, when the wild man get on you?
What in the goddamn hell are you talking about?
He just does stuff no one else does. He tried pro wrestling out, he married Carmen Electra for 9 days, he went on a side mission to Vegas during the NBA season that Michael Jordan basically had to extract him from like a Navy SEAL. More about that in The Last Dance if you're interested. The wedding dress photo we showed you earlier, he wore that to a book signing, by the way. Who else does that? He apparently became the commissioner of the Lingerie Football League at one point. He also had his own MTV show while being an active player in the NBA. Like, no one else has this resume. Also, I think this goes without saying because of what we talked about earlier, but God, he loved a good scuffle. He didn't care who you were or how big you were. Anyone could get it. From Allen Iverson to Shaquille O'Neal, Dennis the Menace will give him a good shove for you. Sometimes he tried to fight people he really shouldn't have though, like the time he kicked a photographer during a game. In conclusion, there's really no one else like Dennis Rodman on or off the basketball court, which is crazy. Out of players who never won with the Lakers or Celtics, he's second all-time in championships by a player. The only 2 guys tied for first ahead of him are his old pals MJ and Scottie Pippen, who he, funny enough, directly helped get into that position. He's up there for the greatest rebounder of all time, even though he's, in the grand scheme of things, not an overpowering force like the 7-foot centers, for example. But at the same time, he built up an even more noteworthy profile outside of basketball. Everything else about him other than basketball is a huge part of why he's the celebrity he is. And there's no doubt at all that there's just no one like him on planet Earth. He's not just an NBA Hall of Famer. He's not just a superstar celebrity. He's Dennis Rodman.